Okay, thank you so much for coming out for another day of all this great stuff that we have. My name is Paul Bruce, as Carolina said. I do want to thank the organizers a great deal. First off, for taking a chance on another organizer to talk about largely what most people might consider back office stuff to these conferences. I'm going to walk this way, I guess. So, first things first. You can contact me at these places. I do a lot of stuff, certainly in the DevOps days, organizing Boston, but also in a nonprofit behind that event so that our organizers don't have to accept liability and sign certain things that, and it's their name. It's the conference. It's the nonprofit Boston DevOps Network. And we'll talk about the structure of how things work there. My other stuff has to do with working in a working group with the IEEE, which has resulted in standards specifically for secure and reliable systems. And now that graduated to ISO 32675, and you'll get a reference there. If I get too close to the side of the stage, please let me know. And I also have tried a sandbox event called OlliFest, which was about observability. So I have my feet in a few sandboxes, and as it turns out, this year I don't think I'm doing OlliFest because I want to put those efforts to my Boston group. There are only really two credentials in life that I've received that matter at all to me. The first was from one of my early mentors back when I was too busy doing Netscape Navigator 2.0 stuff and building applications before really web applications existed. It was all just web pages and web rings and links. The other one is I'm a dad. So the more time that I spend getting achievements like this, the better my life is and the better their life is. So to also be a volunteer, I have a full-time job. I'm a volunteer organizer of multiple things. I tend to overcommit a little, right? And it would be nice if we figure out how to do the things that we need to do in life. I feel like volunteering and helping to organize a tech community is something that is worth my time. How to make that an easy and lean and straightforward thing. So I also love to code and test. I was prying chips out of computers when I was 9. I had my first sort of paid tech gig when I was 13. Shh, don't tell anybody I was getting paid at 13. And I was building HIPAA-compliant web applications by the age of 18. And then I did that for about 8 years and realized that most of the code that I wrote was complete crap. It was untestable. I didn't even have that concept in my mind. And so at some point in that, about 8 years past that, in my mid-20s, I realized maybe I need to understand what testability means. So I've gone on a journey for the 10 years after that to find that. I also love to garden, and I love analogies. So hopefully some of the analogies in this presentation translate. My garden is one of very few ecosystems. I'm gonna stay on this side, how about that? A tree, if you think about a tree, it's been there a long time, right? Horticulture and trees take a long time to propagate. They take a long time to figure out their environment and to actually grow, right? There are short-term things like what I put in my garden, and we get byproducts of that, maybe a little drink with some of my own mint in it on a beach, singing happy birthday. That's great, and that's meaningful to me. But there are things that are a lot longer than my lifespan that have been growing for a while and will continue to grow after I'm gone. It's the same thing with organizing. There are trees, you can put them in certain places, like in the ground would be good, because that's how they evolved. And then you can put them in pots on a rooftop garden, and they're probably not gonna grow the same way. And it's the same with different communities and different organizing pools. And then there's just some weird stuff that nature does. I find myself taking pictures of stuff that grows, and I don't understand what this plant is. I know it's a cactus, I know it was from Austin, but I have no idea. Like, this is not the type of plant that would grow in anywhere. So the good thing is there's diversity in every ecosystem, is my point. And that's the analogy between gardening and between growing a community. There's also friendships in every people system. So as we go around the world, I get the luxury of being able to meet some of the people that I only developed relationships with during COVID time. There are other global organizers like Laura in the corner there, Laura Santamaria, that I get to meet in person for the first time, and that's great. But the friendships started not just because we met each other. Some of them actually started because of conferences, and other ones because we had to help each other online. And there are people that I meet along the way. One of the people in the upper right works with me at Tricentis in incubation engineering. And I was looking for a way to work with this person, Seth, for a long, long time, right? For years before this. And now we get to do some really cool stuff together. But some things take a lot of time, especially friendships, develop. And when I say people systems, well, before I talk about people systems, the other love of mine is Star Trek. And this is Quark, and his brother said, but brother, I have friends. I have community here. I don't want to go. And I love Quark's response. He goes, friends? Community? You sound like some sniveling human. Yeah, we're humans. We're people, right? At least I think all of us in this room are people. Nobody brought pets, right? We are all people, and that's a great thing. It's great to have a commonality. As generic as that is, that brings a lot to the table. That means that I know you, in some way, need psychological safety, like I do. You need a sense of belonging, like I do. Maybe in different levels, for different reasons, but there's a commonality there. And that's the great thing about communities and building communities. You can count on some of these things. Have you ever heard of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It's kind of the triangle of, you start with, basic living situations, and then towards the way up, you end up with higher things like, am I feeling loved, right? You have to build on a basis of the basic commonalities first before you can get to things that are like, okay, are we on the right track? Are you doing something you really want to do? And in this community, particularly, we system a lot. On-call stuff, right? We system, we help build systems, we help deploy systems, the tech systems, but we are also a system as well. We are a people system. By the way, all these photos are licensed because I took them. So even the first one where there was a little piece of grass growing out of a random log that was part of a parking lot, I took that last week because you never know where something's going to grow from. And at least with incubation engineering and with the thought process of where does innovation lie in my full-time job, I get to think about that a lot, and then I get to do stuff about that. And outside, working with the meetup, I found that it's important for us to be able to have open dialogues and conversations, open spaces, and capture those thoughts. I overuse Post-its a lot, right? Like I've got 5 packs of Post-its in my backpack for no good reason, except for if you have ideas and you want to talk about that. I'm down for that. And so we do that at the meetup occasionally. We always have Post-its available. The one on the upper left is from about 3 years ago, before COVID, and there were a lot of thoughts, and I believe somewhere in there you'll see my people, process, and technology. Because if you had a thought in that meetup, maybe it was a people and process thing, maybe it was a process and tech thing, maybe it was a tech and a people thing, or maybe it was just one or the other. So being able to plot this stuff out and have conversations two-dimensionally is actually very powerful, because guess what? Then you can take a picture of it, and then you can share it with others, or you can refer to it yourself. Maybe parts of the conversation you missed because you were too busy doing email, or you were listening to the point that you thought was being made, but then you go back and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. So it's really important to capture, right? And some things are private, but other things, hey, if it's not that, share it. The other thing is I use Post-its at home, like Kanban, personal Kanban and family Kanban, right? So that's on the upper right. And this is a great one. This is from Marseille. I got to visit the Neolode tribe out there in 2019. And we went to a restaurant, and I went outside, and I had some thoughts. I couldn't get them out. I had to get them out of my head. I left my Post-its on the table outside. And then I went back inside, and we had more time to talk. And then, that's my computer telling me move on. And then when I came back out, there was this couple, and they were on a date. How cute is that? They were on a date, and they were doing this like game where you write the thing, and then you put it on the forehead, and you have to guess who's on your forehead. I would have never imagined that somebody used Post-its for that. Like, it's just not my thing. I mean, because I got kids, so I don't go on dates all that much. But like, you never know what people are gonna do when you give them an opportunity to work together, to collaborate together. So, if we keep going here. Yes. And again, the analogy, to me, community is a garden for both relationships and ideas, right? So these are photos of the last year and a half that I've been with Tricentis, the company I work with, where first off, we get to win awards for having good ideas. Isn't that cute? A little trophy you can put on your, well, it was meaningful during COVID, especially having gone through the acquisition, new people, being recognized, right? Feeling like there's a space, that was really important. But I have a weekly internal informal gathering, a meetup, I called the Mug Club, and you never know who's gonna show up. It's actually really good to have a non-recorded, informal space where people can kind of share what's challenging them this week, or what was the success they had. You can build these little gardens both outside your company and inside your company. And the Lego trophies. So sometimes you get to a community and people, there's something going on and maybe you learn something, but you don't build these relationships like you do. You kind of come and you kind of go. And then maybe a meetup run by a specific company, but they're just trying to get your leads, that kind of thing, as opposed to like a real community with people who have the spirit of caring. Genuinity matters a lot, and that's what you're feeling. When you come to a thing like this, and you feel like, wow, I really got something out of it, but also I made friends, that's because there are genuine people, not just the organizers and volunteers, but in our crowd, the we of us together, that make that possible. And the genuinity I could provide to the gig, which is this internal hackathon that we have at Tricentis, the thing I could do with limited budget was to take my Legos and make trophies, little trophies, and ship them around the world. And you would not believe how much people love that. So anyway, so community is a garden, but it's also like a puzzle, right? I think in puzzles. And the more options you have on the table, sometimes you don't know what your ideas are and how long it's gonna take for them to materialize. And so you have to dump the box of puzzle pieces out on the table. You have to flip them over. You start to find the edges, right? Then you start to figure out color scheme. Where is this gonna go? Where's that gonna go? That's what figuring out community is like too. Sometimes the pieces fall on the floor. You don't realize it. You're missing pieces until later. But community is a puzzle that we put together, like we put the puzzle pieces together, but we do that together. I mean, you can do a puzzle by yourself, but have you ever done it with multiple people? Who's done a puzzle that's like together? You do a couple together. Yeah, I mean, there are many ways to put a puzzle together, but doing it together is an important part of community. So, wow. Okay, so this is what it looks like in Boston. We've got the Boston DevOps meetup, which is a monthly thing. In fact, I got to send a meetup like now about next week. There's our Boston DevOps Slack group, which for better or for worse Slack, is the place that we've been working for 6 or 7 years, active community daily. Then there is the yearly event, which happens this year in October. And then there's the Boston DevOps Network, that nonprofit board behind that. So those are the basic entities, but also we've got other regional meetups. I'm just now starting to build an alliance of meetup organizers that are like-minded in the sense of they're relatively vendor neutral, they care a lot about their community, the basic principles of, and they care enough about to have a code of conduct, of course, those kind of things, and trying to figure out how can we share resources. Because as it turns out, coming out of COVID, it's freaking hard to find a space that doesn't have 13 different obligations, or maybe it's available, maybe it's not. It's like, it's the old days of organizing but it's also just more complicated now, even coming out of COVID. And so we need to work together. And when I say community in double quotes, do you think this is what community means? Like, does this make up a community? Is this good enough? To meet monthly, to have a yearly event, to have an active Slack group? I don't think so. We'll talk about that. So for me, I've been on a learning journey. I read as much as I can. I listen because I'm partially dyslexic, so books put me to sleep unless I listen to them. And so I absorb a lot of material. One of the things that we read in the book club, the Boston DevOps Book Club, years ago was The Art of Community, because I asked them to, and they said, cool, let's do that. And in the art community, they define a community as a group of individuals who share a mutual concern for one another's welfare. It's a pretty darn good definition. I think I can improve on that, at least for my purposes, at least for my personality. It's an intentional inclusion of, improvement for, and a responsibility to each other. Skin in the game. We've heard that from a couple of other talks, right? From Jan's talk yesterday. Skin in the game, not just for the people who are trying to organize it and putting the effort in to get it happen, but the people who are benefiting from the value. It's fine to come and go from a community, that's not fine. And we need to make it easy for people to do that, figure out if that works for them, but we also need to make it super easy for people to provide some effort, especially if it's a volunteer community, to make it easy to do 1 hour here, 1 hour there, maybe just stand by the door for one of the events. That helps, right? But inclusion of, improvement for. I'm improving myself for you. And I would hope that you do the same for me and for others. And so that's my definition. And then we get into DevOps, because this is a talk about a DevOps community. And so I could care less about holy wars about how to define DevOps. Now, is it a hashtag buzzword? Yeah, it's been like that for years. In the marketing space, in the industry. For me, though, my thoughts are out there, and you can go, but to simplify it, to me, DevOps is a question. It's not an answer. It's a question of how we work better together. Here we go again. Good. For a lot of other people that I talk to, various field people, customers, prospects, people out in the industry, you go, what is DevOps? And they go, well, we were doing CI/CD. Well, we got Jenkins, or no, let's not say that anymore. Well, we're doing Circle CI, or well, we're doing, and they start talking about tools really quickly. I don't know, have you ever heard that, somebody call another person a tool? At some point, it's kind of like, we're not just talking about technology tools, we're talking about people tools sometimes. And so the et cetera, the industry, the definition of DevOps is complicated, and complicated especially by there's so many outspoken authors and speakers and stuff in the industry, but I could care less, right? It's a question that we have to work out together. That's all. And there were no glory days in tech. This is the history according to Paul, starting in about 2015. So there was the early cloud craze where clouds, managed cloud providers started really making it easy for us to use their services. And then the DevOps stuff, the books started at about that same time that DevOps Days started as well. But between the clouds providing their awesomeness, which turned out in the early days not to be so much, there was this period of DevOps was, I don't know what the heck, I'm gonna be right back, I'm busy, I'll see you later. Right? It was like rushing around trying to fix all the things, and we didn't really know or care. We knew our salaries were starting to go up, but we didn't really know or care what the driving forces behind this. And then the CEOs got on board, and they were like, ooh, DevOps is a thing. And then directed all the marketing to do that, and started to name their tools DevOps and blah, blah, blah. And then right around the time of that peak of inflation, when everybody was blah, blah, blah with the DevOps, COVID happened. And so that was fouled up beyond all recognition. We were all like, in a while, too long didn't read, work from home, deal with it tomorrow. That's that era. And now we're in this era of like site reliability engineers will fix that for you, apparently right now, and buy one today, basically. Buy one today, like buy one right now. You've got to have SREs. Ooh, SREs. And along that lines, there was other research done, and managers started to say, oh, there's a resource that I can use to hit my people on the head with these metrics that they have to use. Populist thinking. But in the meantime, DevOps Days has helped us ask the question, which metrics matter to you? Why would we do this? Why do we need this? What tools are there? How do you deal with burnout, right? So DevOps Days has been there from practically the beginning. That whole time when everything changed for everybody, my favorite quote, and it's nice to pack this away and say, all that complexity and all that screwed up situation that we had to deal with, and not just we in this room, but our partners, spouses, our kids, I'd like to pack it away by basically saying, my face was like this, just like Turk from Scrubs was. He says, it's a good thing there's surgical masks, because if they saw my face while I was doing surgery, it would look like that. That's what my face looked like half the time during COVID. And so when we got to organizing the event, right, what we encountered, there were a lot of difficulties, right? First off, virtual game nights don't work. We never got that to work. We had to be proactive and over-communicate. When we tried to do virtual booths for sponsors, they had no idea how to function. And neither did we. We didn't provide them good ways to utilize that and feel like they were getting benefit from being part of the event. DevOps Days Boston 2021, it was all virtual. It was a single track. We consolidated it down. We were able to turn ticket sales into a completely 100% donation, and people responded to that. I did the same thing with OliFest. And to date, we've done $40,000 of donations to local causes. We turned this waste stream, which wasn't really wasteful to begin with, into yet another value stream by giving back to the community. We also realized in 2020 that it was probably a good idea to talk with some of the other organizers like Maddie Stratton in Chicago, who's now a global organizer, about what are you planning on doing for this 2020 thing, you know? So being able to collaborate was really important. And it was, as it turns out at the bottom, one of the most important things that I found to do and started to become like, hey, I need to support the supporters, was to have individual checks, like check-ins with people, because we weren't seeing each other monthly in person and having those down-to-earth beer or water cooler type conversations anymore. So we had to actually make time for that on our calendars. And oh, by the way, in a virtual event, if the AV disappears, if the internet goes out for the person that's doing the AV, it's like as if the second day you walked to the Clarion and it didn't exist, right? In a virtual world, your AV not working is like the conference venue just being ripped from the earth and disappeared completely. So very different logistics than the old days. And in all of this, alignment helps. This is a picture of me asking my 9-year-old, what are you making? And he said, I'm making hats. I said, they look like boats to me. And they were all spread out. And I said, what if you made those boats look like they were all rowing in the same direction? In fact, it's so important that I brought it up in 2019 in my work with the IEEE. I said, y'all are talking about alignment, but what do you mean by it? And so I kind of forced the conversation at that moment to say, let's get a solid definition of what alignment means. It's not bullshit. It's not a corporate term. It means something real. It means that you understand what the critical inputs are to a thing, that you act according to a plan. You plan your work, you work your plan. You communicate this to everyone, right? Does this sound like the work that you get to do all the time? Not always. You accept responsibility, and so does the person providing that work to you accepts responsibility over that work. There's no scapegoats. And that you harmoniously, you work purposely to harmonize while you work together. This is the definition that I would, well, I'm on the record for being part of the standard. And this is one of the things that I contributed. So when we were putting the puzzle pieces together in Boston, well, guess what? A lot of the logistics were the same. I was out front receiving packages and having to move them inside. Fen, up in the upper right, was an organizer of numerous events, and then helped us out in 2020 when we went virtual with the AV. Remember, I said it's super important. Thank goodness we had Fen. And then in 2021 again. But coming back, this was the first time I got to organize with this person in person. And then there's Michael Clark and Don Lucchini. We still had boxes to move. And the event happened. That was me at the end going, like, thank goodness. Some of the details there are that, of course, we had to, as an organizer group, have a summit a couple months beforehand to really get in the same room. And this was still during sort of COVID and safety considerations. So there were one or two of the other organizers or board members that were not in a place that they could feel comfortable with that, so we remoted them in. And it's not always great. We had to learn that it's not always equitable. It's not the same experience. You know, people are raising their hands, but you don't recognize it until too late, those kind of things. Typical Zoom logistics, but we still had to get together and talk about some things. There were new things like Cody brought up balancing the inclusivity in terms of the vaccination logistics, right? We have to verify the vaccination card name matches their state ID name. But then again, we've also got this policy that says, you know what, your name doesn't have to match your ID for the badge. It's your name, whatever you want there, right? And so we had to sort of abide by certain requirements from the state and from the federal stuff for the health and safety and think about those very seriously, how we're gonna do that, even to so much as how people are gonna be routed in. There was a vendor for the chairs and the tables and the linens that failed last minute, 2 weeks before the event. They literally capsized as a business, they closed. So we had to scramble around to figure out how to do that. And it was the heroic efforts of Don, one of the other organizers, getting the chairs, like 400 chairs, into the venue. I mean, imagine what your back would be like afterwards. And that's what it was for us, for him and I. It does take every effort from both the volunteers and the organizers to pull this stuff out. And so I would say, could I ask for a round of applause to these organizers and volunteers because they deserve it? And I say open spaces matters almost most, because if you only say one thing matters most, usually there's something else that falls through. It's a biggest contributing factor thing, right? There's no one root cause. There's no one biggest thing that matters most. There's a lot of things that matter most. So, but open spaces matter. We kind of got away from that in the COVID time because it's hard to do open spaces virtually. It's kind of hard. So when we came back, we knew that we wanted to have open spaces as like a big part, like the entire afternoon, and return to that logistic because it was important. And we realized we always could use more organizers and volunteers. So the good thing about it is a lot of the work that we did ended up producing a good soil bed, like in a garden. Prior garden bed prep paid off, both in terms of new faces and new learnings. And all volunteer efforts are valuable. I would say precious here, but that sounds a little weird in English. But they are perishable. Like they don't last. It's like milk, it spoils. So if you don't respect and appreciate all efforts, and that includes participants in open spaces, just being here is participation. And sponsors are participating too, that's important. So when we think about organizing in DevOps Days Boston, there are various levels. We realized we need to communicate the cost, time, effort, and be clear about that. It's kind of like 1 or 2 hours every so often, blah, 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 right? So there's a bunch of different layers, and if you end up in a core organizer role, you're probably gonna be having to do on season about 4 or 5 hours a week minimum, right? For about a couple months before the event. We have growth paths. This is what I was saying. I need to be intentional about thinking through the design of the thing, the architecture of how to support volunteer effort, which, by the way, I can't tell people what to do. This is not a command and control structure like your job. There's no hierarchy of reporting. We are all equals. And so our cadence and structure, the way we do committees, right? We try to break this up so that we're not having to talk about all the things in all the meetings all the time with all the people and wasting half people's time. There are different work areas that we do. And more importantly, if we want to grow and maintain this stuff, we need to think about matriculation, how people come in, the retention of people who are trustworthy, right? Who have demonstrated that they can be counted on. And then if somebody has to, if there's a family event, if I get hit by a bus, maybe some people want that. But no, if something happens in any given organizer's life, whether they're core and they're a big part of it or otherwise, it should be safe. There should be no guilt. There should be no stress. We might have to rebalance stuff, but it should be allowed to be able to feel comfortable about that. So my last few thoughts are, look, comfort is not growth. When I have to set the garden up, my back is killing me, right? And keep it like this? Sure. Like this is a photo from my local school system. And it's nice to think that maybe we have this pretty picture of how it's going to work, but usually it's a mess for a while, and it's always a mess. You might not just know about it. The only way that it goes from a mess to a pretty picture is by intentional effort. So that's what we do with the Boston DevOps Network. I particularly ascribe to this notion that strategy is the craft of figuring out both things, which things are worth pursuing and capable of being accomplished. So when I bring that strategic mindset that I use in my job at Tricentis to the volunteer efforts, there are things that we agree are worth doing. And are they capable of being accomplished? And as it turns out, yes, there are a couple things that we're going to pursue this year that we've pursued in the past, and it's capable of being accomplished. And really, it's so that we can do all more of this. So I can have more lap time with my cat, so that we can get together regularly, so we can have family time, we can have friend time. That's my friend Sal from Tricentis. And then we can also do that here. So I think that's it for me. There's a quick reference to the book club. We've got a ton of learning that we've gone through. So thank you for your time. I know that we have very limited time for questions, if at all, but we've got a coffee break coming up. So I'll be out there. If you've got any questions, I'll be here and then I'll be there. So thank you for your time.